Hello students, welcome back to KHC Online Education. Before we begin, here are some questions based on cube roots of perfect cubes. Remember we learned in the previous class? So based on that, here are some questions to do. You can solve it and you can check your answers as well. Today we are going to start with square roots of perfect squares. Now we already know what is squaring. It is defined as multiplying a number by itself. So when we multiply 4 by 4, we say that we have squared 4, or we read it as 4 squared, right? And this is how we express it. So the square of 4 is nothing but 4 into 4, which is equal to 16. So 16 is the square of 4, okay? Now what is square root? If 16 is the square of 4, then 4 is the square root of 16. Okay, so they are just reciprocal of each other. So if 16 is the square of 4, then 4 is the square root of 16. Similarly, if 25 is the square of 5, 5 is the square root of 25. This is the symbol of square root. So square root of 16 is square root of 4 square, right? 16 can be written as square of 4. This square and root gets cancelled, therefore your answer is 4. Now to find the square root of perfect squares, it is very necessary for us to be well versed with the squares of the numbers from 1 to 10. So I'm sure you already know the square of these numbers. So it's very important that you memorize this first before proceeding ahead. Okay. Properties of perfect squares and square roots. Okay, so what are their properties? If a square number ends in 0, the square root ends in 0. You can see out here, if the number ends with 0, the square value will also end with 0. And in case of 0, the number of zeros will always double up. That is, if the number contains 1 0, the square of that particular number will contain 2 zeros. If the number contains 3 zeros, the square of that number will contain 6 zeros, okay? So that is the first property. The second property is, if the square number ends in 1, the square root ends in 1 or 9. If the square number ends in 1, so square number ends in 1 in case when the number is ending with 1, and also when the number is ending with 9. Therefore, so whenever you see 1 as the units digit of a square number, then you have to understand that the square root of that particular number will either end in 1 or 9. Similarly, if the square number ends in 4, the square root will end in 2 or 8. So you see, if the square number ends in 4, in case the number ends with 2, and in case the number ends with 8. So whenever the number ends with either 2 or 8, the square will end with 4. That is for sure. If the square number ends in 9, the square root will end in 3 or 7. Now, if the square number ends in 9, square number ends in 9, the square root will end in 3 or 7. If a square number ends in 6, the square root ends in 4 or 6. You see, in case the square number is ending with 6, it's ending in case of 4 and 6. Therefore, if the square number is ending with 6, then the square root will end with either 4 or 6. Similarly, if a square number ends in 5, then we know that the square root will also end in 5. So that is the relationship between the last digit of the square and the square root. So if the last digit is 1, the square root last digit will be either 1 or 9. If it is 4, then 2 or 8 will be the digit of the square root, last digit. If the last digit of the square is 9, then the last digit of the square root will be 3 or 7. Similarly, for the rest of them, okay? A perfect square will never end with the digits 2, 3, 7 or 8. So always remember, if a number is a perfect square, you can always verify whether a number is a perfect square or not by seeing the last digit. So if the last digit is either 2, 3, 7 or 8, then it is confirmed that none of that numbers are perfect squares, because you see, you have squared from 1 to 10 and you see that none of the square numbers are ending with 2, 3, 7 or 8. You don't see 2, 3, 7 and 8 in square numbers. Okay, so these four numbers are very unique. As you know that these four numbers were so unique in case of cube roots and cube roots of perfect cubes as well, right? So even here in case of square roots, the main property of these four numbers is they'll never appear in a square number. Okay, they'll never appear as the units digit of a square number. Now, after you memorize those square values of 1 to 10, it is important that you remember from 10 all the multiples of 10. Okay, so the first 10 multiples of 10, if you know them, you should know the square of these numbers as well, because it's very easy to find out, because square of 1 is 1. I told you, while finding square, in case of square number, the number of zeros will double up. So now in case of 100 there are 2 zeros, but in case of 10,000 there are 4 zeros. So before we proceed, it's very important that you memorize these square values as well. Let us look at the first example. Find the square root of 7,744. As the number is ending with 4, we know if it ends with 4, then the square root will end with 2 or 8. Right? Therefore, your answer is either something 2 or something 8. You are sure that the units digit will be either 2 or 8. Okay? Now, after that, we will focus on the whole number. Okay, as a whole, the number as a whole, you see that 7,744, it would lie between the square of 80 and 90, right? 7,744, it lies between 6,400, which is the square of 80, and 8,100, which is the square of 90. So what does that mean? That means the square root of 7,744 will definitely lie between 80 and 90. Okay, if this number as a whole lie between the square of 80 and 90, that means the square root will also lie between 80 and 90. So between 80 and 90, there are just two numbers which ends with 2 or 8. So therefore, what are the possible answers? Our possible answers are either 82 or 88. Why? Because we know that our number, okay, our required answer, it has to lie between 80 and 90, because the given square number lies between the square of 80 and 90. Therefore, our possible answers are either 82 or 88. Now, we have to figure out that whether the given number is closer to 6,400 or 8,100. Now, to find out the difference, what you can do, you can just see how different or how far is 77 from 64 and 81. So you can see that 77 is more close to 81 as compared to 6,400, right? Because if you subtract, you see that the difference of these two numbers is 1344, whereas 7744, it lies closer to 8,100. Since it lies closer to 8,100, we take bigger value as our answer. So therefore, 88 is the square root of 7,744. Okay, the only trick is to figure out the number is closer to which of the perfect square number. So if it is closer to the smaller number, you take the smaller value. If it is closer to the bigger square number, then you take the bigger value. That's it. Let's see another example as well. So the number given to you out here is ending with 1. So if it ends with 1, then your answer, your square root will end with 1 or 9, because only in case of square of 9 and 1, the square number will end with 1. Now, you see that 9801 lies between the square of 90 and the square of 100. Now, if the number lies between 90 and 100, then your possible answers are 91 or 99, right? Now, you see that it's 9,801. You can just see that this number appears more closer to 10,000 as compared to 8,100, right? Or you can simply compare 98 with 81 and 100. 98 is more closer to 100. That means you take the bigger value, because the given number is closer to the bigger number. So we choose bigger number as our answer. Therefore, 99 is the square root of 9801. Another example, in case of 5184, the number is ending with 4. Therefore, the answer will end with 2 or 8. Okay. After that, the given number, it lies between the square number 4900 and 6400. Therefore, you see that the given square number lies between the square of 70 and 80. The square root will lie between 70 and 80. So between 70 and 80, only two numbers will end with 2. Only there are just two numbers. So one will end with 2 and the other one will end with 8. So the possible answers are either 72 or 78. Now we have to figure out 51 is closer to 49 or 64. You just have to see the first two values. That's good enough to see the difference. Okay. You see that 51 is more closer to 49. That is why we choose the smaller value. Okay. So out of 49 and 6400, 5184 is closer to smaller number. That is why 72 is the preferred answer, or it is the correct answer. So this is how we are supposed to find the square root of perfect squares. The only condition that you need to know is the number given to you must be a perfect square. If a number given to you is not a perfect square, then your answer won't match. So always make sure that the given number is a perfect square. Then this is the best technique to find the square root. Now, to find the square of 529, the number ends with 9, so therefore our answer ends with 3 or 7. The number 529, it lies between two square numbers, 400 and 900. Now, out of 400 and 900, 529 is more closer to 400. So if it's more closer to 400, then our small answer is the correct answer. So therefore, 529 is closer to 400. That means 23 is the answer. Square root of 529 is 23. To find the square root of 12544, the given number ends with 4. Therefore, your answer ends with 2 or 8. You know, okay. Now you know that this number given to you is more than 10,000, because you know that 10,000 is the square of 100, right? Now, after 100, the next multiple of 10 is 110. So 110, if you find the square of 110, you are just squaring 11, which is 121. 10 becomes 2 zeros while squaring, right? So now you see that the given number doesn't even lie between the two square numbers. So after 110, what is the next number? The next number is 120. 120, when you square it, you get 14400. Now you see that 12544 lies between the square of 110. This is the square of 110, and this is the square of 120. Okay. Now you will compare that 12544 lies nearer to which number. So as the number is starting with 12, and we already have a square number that's starting with 12, we already know that 12544 lies more closer to 12100. Therefore, 12100 is our smaller value. The square root of 12544 lies between 110 and 120. That's for sure. Okay. And now, since it was ending with 2 or 8, our possible answers are just 112 or 118, because right now we found out that this number, it lies between 14400 and 12100. 12100 is the square of 110. This number is the square of 120. So between these two numbers, there are only two numbers that end with 2 and 8. So one is 112 and the other one is 118, right? So out of these two, we see that the given number is more closer to the smaller value. So our smaller answer is the correct answer. So the square root of 12544 is 112. Now we find the square of 25281. The number is ending with 1. Therefore, your square root ends with 1 or 9. 25281. Okay. Now we already know that the square of 15 is 25. Therefore, the square of 150 is 22500. Correct. And the square of 16 is 256. Therefore, the square of 160 is 25600. So the given number, it lies between 22500, which is the square of 150, sorry, and 25600, which is the square of 160. So between these two numbers lie your square root of this number. Now the given number is 252. So you see that 252 will be more closer to the bigger answer or bigger value. Therefore, we choose the bigger answer. So you see 25281, it lies more closer to 25600. And so out of two possibilities, okay, we see that it is closer to the bigger number. That is why bigger number is the correct answer. That's it. This is how we find the square root of any perfect square numbers. Here are some questions which you can try and you can check your answers as well. Here are a few more. And that's it. Now here is a fun fact. An icosagon is a side with 20 sides. A polygon having 20 sides is given a name, icosagon. Okay, so like as you see, though you might not be able to see the 20 sides properly, but there are actually 20 sides out here. Such kind of figure is known as icosagon. That's it for today's class. I'll see you in the next class with a new technique.